Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel AI Era, Islamic and Abrahamic Wisdom. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most critical moments in early Islamic history. We're going to tackle a huge question. How do you transfer power in a brand new state without letting it plunge into total chaos? We are going to explore the brilliant constitutional solution that was created to solve this exact problem.
Now, our analysis today is drawn from the powerful work of Zahir Ahmed Mir, specifically his book, The Foundation of Islamic Jurisprudence. We're focusing on Volume 1, Sub-Volume 3, which is all about the second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab. May God be pleased with him. So, let's get right into it.
I want to start by asking you a question, a really serious one that every leader, every nation has to face sooner or later. What do you think is the single most dangerous moment for any state? Is it a foreign invasion, a terrible famine, maybe a rebellion from within? The answer is a leadership vacuum. It's that terrifying, uncertain moment when the leader is gone and power is just up for grabs. And let me tell you, that is way more dangerous than any army at the gates, because it can dissolve decades of stability in an instant. It can unravel everything from the inside out. And look, this wasn't some abstract political theory for the early Muslim community. No, this was about to become a very, very real life or death crisis that was staring them right in the face. Okay, so let's set the scene. The year is 23 after Hijrah, which puts us around 644 CE. The second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, a true giant of leadership, has just been mortally wounded in an attack. As he lies there in his final moments, he knows that his death could unleash absolute and total chaos upon the community. And the stakes here could not possibly be higher. You have to remember, this was a young, rapidly expanding state, made up of all these different tribes and groups who were only recently united. A power vacuum at this moment, oh man, that would be like throwing a lit match into a powder keg. Political factions could immediately start turning on each other. Old, bitter tribal rivalries that had been put to rest, they'd flare right back up. And then you get to the big one, disputes over who even has the right to rule. It's a straight line from there to civil unrest, and the absolute worst-case scenario, a devastating civil war. So can you imagine, in his final, painful hours, this is the dilemma that Umar is wrestling with. And he's not just thinking, okay, who's the best guy for the job? No, it's so much deeper than that. He's thinking, how? How do we choose the next leader in a way that is legitimate, in a way that's peaceful, and in a way that will be accepted by absolutely everyone? The very survival of the state was on the line. Now, he had to avoid two huge traps, two extremes that were common at the time. On one side, you have monarchy, which basically treats leadership like it's private property that a father just hands down to his son. On the other side, you have the total opposite, anarchy, a complete free-for-all where the strongest, or maybe the most ruthless, just seizes power by force. Umar rejected both of these. He knew there had to be a third way. And that third way, wow, it wasn't just a simple choice. It was the creation of something truly revolutionary for its time. A brilliant system, a new constitutional mechanism designed specifically to prevent that chaos before it could ever start. He established what is known as the Shūrā Council. Now, this wasn't just getting a few wise men in a room for a chat. Not at all. It was a formal electoral body, a real institution. He named 6 of the most respected senior companions and gave them a clear, time-bound mission. Consult among yourselves and choose a new leader from your group. And the clock was ticking. And right here, this is the core insight we get from the analysis. The true genius of Umar's plan wasn't just in the people he chose, but in the process he created. This was an institution with rules, with procedures, and with a hard deadline. It was a mechanism designed to produce a legitimate outcome, no matter how much pressure, grief, or uncertainty was in the air. And what's so incredible is that this mechanism did more than just solve the immediate crisis. In creating it, Umar actually established 4 foundational principles for legitimate governance that are frankly just as relevant today as they were 14 centuries ago. Let's break these down, because each one is a pillar. First, leadership is a public trust, not a personal possession. It's a responsibility, not a right. Second, legitimacy comes from a defined process, not just from force or charisma alone. The how is just as important as the who. Third, that process must prevent any gap, any vacuum where chaos can take root. And finally, number 4, the decision must be made quickly. Procrastination in a moment like this is a direct invitation to instability. So, What was the ultimate impact of this single brilliant decision? It was absolutely profound. He took a moment of potential collapse, a moment where everything could have fallen apart, and he transformed it into an orderly, constitutional process. In essence, he constitutionalized the transfer of power. He created a repeatable, predictable system that could be used again. He turned what could have been a devastating one-time crisis into a constitutional precedent that would echo for ages. That is nation-building at the highest possible level. So the crucial point, the ultimate takeaway from this explainer, is this powerful shift in thinking. It's the move away from relying on the wisdom of a single great leader to relying on the integrity of a legitimate process. You see, a great leader is finite. They will pass away. But a great process, a great institution, that can endure for generations. And that leaves us with a final, thought-provoking question for all of us. Looking at our own world, our own institutions, our own leaders, when is a process more important than a person? This 7th century lesson on governance still echoes today, asking us to think deeply about how we build stability and justice that truly lasts. Thank you so much for joining us. If you found this explainer valuable, please subscribe to our channel, give it a like, and please also share this video with your friends. We'll see you next time. Right into the core of it, because this is the fundamental question, isn't it? When a powerful, visionary leader is no longer there, what happens next? Do you get a peaceful transition, or does it all fall apart in a power struggle? Do you continue as a republic, or does it become a kingdom? This was the very real problem staring Umar ibn al-Khattab right in the face. You see, the challenge he was up against wasn't just about picking the next guy for the job. No, it was so much bigger than that. It was about creating a legitimate, repeatable process, a system that would guarantee stability and justice for the entire community long into the future. He was standing at a massive fork in the road. And, by the way, the letters R.A. you'll see after his name, that's a phrase of respect. He absolutely knew that whatever he did next would set a huge precedent. It would decide whether the state would be built on the idea of community consultation and law or on the old, familiar model of hereditary rule. So how did he handle what is maybe the biggest temptation in history? When you have that much power, the urge to keep it in the family is, well, it's a story as old as time itself. But Omar looked at that easy path and deliberately, consciously, chose a much harder one.
I mean, just think about it for a second. This was the default setting for pretty much every empire and kingdom on the planet. From the Caesars in Rome to the Shahs of Persia, you appoint your son. It's simple, it's direct, it keeps a clear line of succession. It was the expected thing to do, the path of least resistance.
But then, with this one incredibly powerful statement, Umar just changed the entire game. He drew a bright, bold line in the sand. He was declaring that leadership isn't some family heirloom you pass down. No, it's a public trust, and it's governed by principles and by law.
And this is so important to grasp. This wasn't just an emotional choice or his personal feeling on the matter. The source material is very clear. This was a constitutional act. It was a conscious decision to build the entire state on a foundation of legal principle, not on the whims of personal power.
Okay, so if dynasty is off the table, and he's not just going to point a finger and say, "You're next," what's the alternative? How in the world do you build a system that's both stable and fair? And that's a really fair question. I mean, picking one person you trust, someone who's qualified, it seems efficient, doesn't it? It avoids all the debate, gets the job done quickly. But Umar, with this incredible foresight, saw all the hidden dangers in that simple solution. He realized that one person's choice, no matter how wise that person is, can never, ever replace the will of the community. A single nomination? That's just going to create resentment. It's going to split society into factions. And most critically, it would shift the whole basis of legitimacy away from public approval to one man's personal preference. You do that, and you're basically paving the road to a monarchy. And this was his brilliant solution. The answer wasn't a person. It was a process. First, a potential leader had to emerge from serious discussion and consultation among a council. Then, and this is the absolute key, their authority had to be confirmed by the public. That way, power always stayed rooted in the community. And this idea right here, this is the absolute heart of the matter, collective authority. It's a total flip of the script. It means power doesn't flow from the top down, handed out by a king. No, real authority flows from the bottom up. It comes from the consent and the active agreement of the people themselves. But look, creating a good process is only half the battle. You also have to protect it.
It's like building a beautiful house but forgetting to put locks on the doors. So let's look at how Umar built in what we'd today call constitutional safeguards to make sure the system couldn't be cheated.
He wasn't some naive idealist. He was a stone-cold pragmatist. He knew that any system, no matter how brilliantly designed, is vulnerable because people are people. Ambitious individuals could try to pressure, bribe, or intimidate their way to the top. A process without protection is really just a list of suggestions.
Now, what is so fascinating here is how these ancient actions translate perfectly into modern constitutional language. Just look at this table. To prevent coercion and intimidation, he ordered that the council's meetings had to be protected. To stop external pressure, any outside influence had to be blocked. To counter bribery, he did something brilliant. He put a strict, short deadline on the whole process. And to prevent chaos from taking over, he made sure civil order was maintained. These are, for all intents and purposes, 7th century checks and balances.
So, we've walked through the problem, the solution, and the protections he put in place. But why does a decision made over 1,400 years ago still matter to us today? What's the lasting legacy here?
It matters because this wasn't just a quick fix for an immediate problem. This was the foundation of an entire political philosophy. It's a timeless model for how to build a state on the principles of law, of consent, and of public trust, instead of on raw power or family lineage. So if you take away anything from our time together, let it be these core ideas. Public office is a responsibility that is entrusted to a leader, not something they inherit. Real legitimacy doesn't come from a command. It's earned through the consent of the people. And any fair process is completely useless without strong legal protections to defend it. This is the very bedrock of non-dynastic, merit-based governance.
And that's really the question we're left with, isn't it? It's a powerful thought to sit with. In our own time, when we are still debating the nature of power, of legitimacy, and public trust, what lessons can we pull from this ancient blueprint for a state built not on bloodline, but on law? Something to think about. Thanks so much for diving in.
First, we'll tackle that universal challenge of succession, a problem that has toppled entire empires. Then we'll get into the specifics of Umar's solution, how he took the concept of shura, or consultation, and forged it into binding law. After that, we'll look at the 4 core principles that were the bedrock of his system, see how this ancient model speaks directly to modern political crises, and finally we'll wrap up by thinking about what it really means to build leadership that can outlast any single person.
All right, so let's jump right into this core problem. Every single state, every empire, every republic throughout all of history has had to face this fundamental, almost existential test. What happens the day after a powerful, unifying leader is gone?
I mean, really think about it. When a strong ruler leaves the stage, they leave behind this giant power vacuum, a moment where a nation is incredibly vulnerable. And history is just littered with the messy consequences. Right? After Alexander the Great died without a clear successor, his whole empire was torn apart by his generals in decades of war. In Rome, you had the Praetorian Guard sometimes assassinating emperors and literally auctioning off the throne to the highest bidder. This gap, this moment in between, is where raw ambition and passion can just ignite conflict and tear a society apart. So the question isn't just who's next. It's, does the state itself have the strength to survive the transition? This is the exact challenge Hazrat Umar set out to solve.
And this brings us right to the heart of his innovation. See, he didn't just invent some new tradition out of thin air. Not at all. Instead, he took an existing Islamic concept, shura, consultation, and with the precision of a master political engineer, he transformed it from a noble idea into a concrete, legally binding process. Now, this wasn't just some small improvement. This was a revolutionary step forward in the history of governance.
Okay, so the key distinction you've got to grasp is this. Before Omar, shura was seen as a moral virtue, a good and pious thing for a ruler to do. But he had seen firsthand just how explosive succession could be. He understood that to prevent a crisis, consultation couldn't just be advice, it had to be law. He elevated it from a simple recommendation into a full-blown constitutional instrument, a formal, non-negotiable mechanism for making one of the most critical decisions a state could ever face.
So how'd he actually make it work? Well, it was 4 brilliant strokes. First, he defined the membership. He didn't leave it to chance. He named a specific 6-man council of the most respected senior companions of the Prophet Muhammad. This specificity just eliminated any debate over who got to the side. Second, he gave them recognized authority. The legitimacy of these men was totally unquestioned, so their collective decision would be seen as legitimate. Third, a strict timeline. The council had 3 days to decide. 3 days! This was designed to prevent endless debate and paralysis.
It forced a conclusion before factions could form and harden. And fourth, the outcome was binding. The choice they made was obligatory for the entire community. This wasn't some debate club, it was a decision-making body with real teeth.
And by defining the who, the what, the when, and the finality of it all, Hazrat Umar created one of history's earliest and most effective forms of structured constitutional consultation. He built a predictable, rule-bound process to manage a dangerously unpredictable moment. And get this, to ensure impartiality, he even said his own son could be an advisor, a tiebreaker, but he was explicitly forbidden from being chosen as the leader. What a powerful statement against hereditary rule.
But, a brilliant mechanism like this doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It was the expression of a really deep and coherent political philosophy. To truly get the genius of it, we have to look at the 4 foundational principles that gave this whole system its incredible strength and purpose.
The how of the council only really makes sense when you understand the why. First up, unity over personality. Umar knew that a state built around one person, no matter how great they are, is fragile by its very nature. The institution had to be stronger than any individual. Second, consent over coercion. He got that true stability comes from the willing consent of the people, the bay'ah. A leader chosen through a legitimate process would have that public buy-in. Third, process over passion. In that emotional, grief-stricken moment after a leader's death, rules have to win out over personal loyalties or ambitions. And finally, accountability over kingship. This whole system was a direct rejection of the hereditary monarchies next door. It ensured the next leader was chosen for merit, not born into power, making them answerable to the community, not above it. And let's be absolutely clear here. This was not some academic exercise. For Hazrat Umar, these principles weren't just lofty ideals for a philosophical debate. They were the essential, load-bearing pillars you need to build a resilient state. A state that could not only survive its leaders, but actually thrive long after they were gone.
So, that was the 7th century. What in the world does this solution have to say about the world we live in now, nearly 1,400 years later? Well, as it turns out, its relevance is absolutely startling. I mean, just look at this contrast. It's so stark. On one side, you have the core elements of Umar's model: consultation, clear rules, legitimacy from the community. And on the other side, well, you've got a list of the very political diseases that plague so many modern nations. Political power treated like a family inheritance, military coups, personality cults that make a state so fragile, and constitutions that fall apart right when you need them most. Umar's system was basically designed as an antidote to these exact problems.
So the lessons from this are just timeless, and they read like a manual for good governance. First, you have to plan for leadership transition before you're in a crisis. Second, the process for picking leaders has to be governed by clear, pre-agreed rules, not by force or wealth or family name. And crucially, public consent is the ultimate source of legitimate power. Without it, a ruler is just a tyrant. And finally, his system shows that the absolute power of a monarchy and the chaos of a power vacuum, they're really just 2 sides of the same dangerous coin, and a well-designed process is the only defense against both.
So when you put it all together, this single act of statesmanship really offers us this profound, challenging redefinition of what true leadership even means. It's a vision that looks way beyond the leader themselves. This right here, this quote gets to the very heart of his philosophy. Real, sincere leadership isn't about making yourself indispensable or clinging to power. It's about having the foresight and the humility to build institutions so strong, so robust, that they don't depend on any one person. It's the ultimate act of service to the future.
And this is exactly why the Shūrā Council he set up was so much more than just a symbol. It was a practical, brilliantly engineered firewall, a constitutional mechanism designed with one primary goal: to stop the state from falling into the chaos and bloodshed of a secession crisis. It was a firewall against personal ambition, against tribal loyalties, and against the very real threat of civil war.
So in the end, when he was faced with the ultimate test of his own leadership and his own legacy, Hazrat Umar didn't leave the future to chance. He didn't try to seize it for his own family. He entrusted it to something far more enduring than any one person. He left it to 3 pillars that could stand the test of time: the supremacy of law, the wisdom of consultation, and the bedrock of public trust.
A leader's legacy isn't defined by how they get power, but by how they plan for its peaceful transfer. And as we've seen, Hazrat Umar's design was nothing short of revolutionary, a timeless model of foresight and institutional genius. Join us next time as we explore another huge test of his leadership, the Year of Ashes, and how he used emergency powers to govern through a catastrophic, nation-threatening famine. Thanks for watching.